Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading for Yom Kippur, post-Yom Kippur 5784. So Yom Kippur on the Jewish calendar is really the pinnacle of holiness and perhaps Jewish engagement, because Jews who don't come to synagogue but once a year would likely be there for Yom Kippur. It's a day of fasting and, depending how long you stay, a day of prayer and reflection. And traditionally, people would dress in like white to mimic, or in white shrouds directly to mimic death. And because the whole idea is really to think about who you want to be, and the possibility, that we don't know, or don't always know, but, life is mortal. Everyone is ultimately going to meet an end. And who do you want to be as a person, and what do you want your life to be? It's a very reflective holiday in that way, so it just sort of adds to those ruminations, dressing as if for the end. It's a dress rehearsal, if you will. But anyway, I can leave more information down below, and I'm talking about reading I did during and before the holiday, and after a little bit, starting as I often do now with these AM reading videos, with a short story and a collection. And last AM reading, I finally started the summer 2022 issue of the Iowa Review, where I am hoping to get through all the short stories in this collection and discuss them. And this week I read Runaway by Serkan Gorkemli, which was a really interesting story. It takes place in Turkey, and the primary character we're following is a young man called Hassan, who is a aging rent boy. He's like in his early 30s, so it's kind of questionable how long he can pull off this gay subcultural group, or where he is effeminate and largely looking for like a daddy type figure, sort of a more masculine man, and that's sort of the gender dynamics of the sexual relationship. And he is purely a sexual being in terms of what he wants out of his gay relationships. It's about sex and perhaps about financial security, because he is hoping perhaps for a sugar daddy to help him with his bills and paying the rent or whatever he needs to do to survive in the wider world. And he does go to these gay cultural events sometimes, but he finds a lot of the desire for more mainstream acceptability in gay culture to like be something he's not that interested in. He mostly goes for the free food, or maybe to pick guys up or that sort of thing. And he goes to this one event where an American man named Adam is there to talk about trying to make gay marriage legal, which is something that Hassan doesn't really care about so much, but he comes anyway, and he's, dressed to the nines in a sort of, effeminate rent boy persona. And he definitely catches Adam's eye immediately, and you could tell immediately after the lecture is over and they leave together that, they're going to have a sexual night together. And we find out in the hotel room that Adam actually is into a little light bondage, and we then, we fade away from the actual sexual component of it, and then Adam and Hassan spend the next day together. And you learn a little more about Adam and Hassan, I think, which is really interesting in this story. I guess, it's easy to come in with opinions and assumptions. That's something I thought of a lot with this story. I'm generally someone who's a little, sometimes when I hear about the gay community that's kind of anti-mainstream, as it were, it almost feels intolerant, like, there's only one way to be gay and that sort of thing. But, it's obviously, there should not only be one way to be gay, either in becoming more mainstream or not, and maybe being mainstream can choke off other avenues. And anyway, the more interesting thing is to think, you come in and Hassan is kind of stereotypical, like that's your first assumption, like he comes in with a literal label of rent boy, and then you kind of get to see a little bit more of who he is throughout the day, and you also, in a more negative way, I think, get to see Adam more as he is. I mean, light BDSM in the bedroom is whatever, but I mean, when you kind of come to see, first of all, that he's a hypocrite, that he has founded an organization based on some experience he had in a nonprofit after school, where he's preaching, the idea of gay mainstream life, but he doesn't really believe it at all. He also doesn't think it's at all possible in Turkey, so he's very cynical. That's something Hassan picks up on. And then later, Hassan takes him to this fashion show, which is a component of it is these prostitutes who are female prostitutes, possibly from Russia, who are kind of cheap in the way that Hassan is cheap, and he kind of sees them as like, kindred spirits, but Adam immediately comes out of it and he's judging them in a derogatory way, like, oh, these people are cheap whores and that sort of thing. And it really just shows how, beyond the whole idea of whether gay marriage is whatever gay marriage is, he doesn't really respect people. So that's when my opinion of Adam really plummeted. And it was just interesting to think about, because when I went into the story and I assumed he was on the level about what he was preaching, I thought maybe he was a more sympathetic character. But even, not believing in gay marriage, there's ways to do it like Hassan, where you still see people and have respect for people. And then there's Adam, who does not make Americans look well in Turkey. I guess that's how I'll say it. And of course there's a lot of language and interesting Turkish background in this as well. So I really enjoyed reading this story. And next, I finished Standing Again at Sinai by Judith Plaskow, which I started during Rosh Hashanah, and I still haven't written a review. I really feel like I want to put a lot more research into it. I didn't actually take a lot of notes while I was reading, so I want to, this is the sort of academic book from 30 years ago where most of the reviews are in academic journals. Sans Goodreads and how that's democratized things a bit, but, more detailed reviews are in, academic journals, and I feel like maybe that'll help me solidify some of my thoughts, especially since it has been now a little while since I finished it, but I did really enjoy it. It challenged me. I'm sure there's some parts where I might argue a little, but that seems par for the course in Judaism. She has like these 6 chapters where she goes through Jewish theology and history and feminist and more general ideas about sexuality. A little, of both, of Jewish ideas and broader cultural ideas about sexuality and God and so forth, and is talking about maybe how to make these ideas bigger than male-centeredness and patriarchal-centeredness. It's a book that was written 30 years ago, and I feel like, in a way, from this vantage point, it can be pessimistic to see how little has changed, because so much of the language is popular in leftist circles today, but it doesn't necessarily mean a lot of thought has changed. Also, it's like before the days of directly questioning gender binaries and thinking of non-binary language, which, frankly, maybe today now could really help with like decoupling the idea of God as a male figure with male pronouns, because now we have more pronouns we talk about more generally in society. And I was intrigued by the chapter on sexuality, as one I didn't read last week yet, and how to perhaps, make sexuality something that's tied in more with spiritualism to get past a lot of the taboos in Judaism. It's interesting, in Judaism there's a lot of anti-sexual taboos, but then there's also, within patriarchal contexts, a lot of joy in sexuality and in, sex between married people. But in a lot of ways, it does seem like we have changed enough that in most liberal Judaism, we don't see homosexuality in the terms that, the ancient thinkers did, and that we see it as another expression of love. And in that way, we can maybe, deal with using sexuality not as something that's only carnal or only about one type of relationship, and make it more about who you are as a person and how you experience your life and give to broader, ideas of joy and being part of the community. So that's definitely was intriguing to read about. And yeah, I do hope to have a written review for Goodreads soon. I feel like I do like talking on BookTube, but I'm more of a writer than a talker. So hopefully when I do get this review out, that I'm probably putting too much pressure on myself on now, but I'd like the review to feel like kind of more definitive for myself for something that, for a book that is trying to say profound things, I guess I want to say profound things back. But I did enjoy this. I think, if you consider yourself interested in Jewish feminism at all, possibly feminism at all, this could be interesting to you, although it is very academic writing, and it might be a little bit of a bar of entry to people that don't have much understanding of Jewish religion. But yeah, definitely par for the course for something thoughtful for Rosh Hashanah reading. And in fact, something that one of my rabbis brought up in a sermon on Rosh Hashanah then came up in this book as I was reading it in the afternoon, so that was pretty cool. The next book I finished is THISTLEFOOT by GennaRose Nethercott. I kind of don't want to talk about this one that much in this video because I read this as a Jewish sci-fi or fantasy or magical realist book for Sci-Fi September, and so I am hoping to do a video where I review this book and another book I'm about to start reading that's another Jewish magical realism sort of book, and compare and contrast them. But I've been looking forward to reading this book for a while. It was like a big bestseller. It made a lot of hype last year when it came out, and earlier in the spring, my synagogue's book club, we had a Zoom event with the author, and I wrote about it in one of my blogs. I'll link down below. But to give something about the story, which I really enjoyed, this is the story of Ballantine and Isaac Yaga, who are descended from Baba Yaga, who Nethercott has made into a Jewish woman living in early 20th century Russia as the empire is starting to crumble. And like Nethercott's family, Baba Yaga's family was displaced by a violent pogrom. She remade a real shtetl, or Jewish village, in honor of her own ancestors who were persecuted by the White Army and by peasants in the area. I often think of, the Bolsheviks, and the USSR was also ultimately not good for the Jews, and the Bolsheviks did ultimately start, killing Jews as well, although maybe when they had a little more power after 1919. But yeah, certainly in its dying embers, when the White Russians and the Tsarist Russians were looking for someone to blame, they went to their usual scapegoats. And anyway, so that's generally backstory, but this is the sort of story that is very much about memory and keeping memory alive and keeping stories alive. And the villain in the story is, in fact, a force of nature that intends to destroy memory. That's really his intent. And so he comes back into being when the house on chicken legs that Baba Yaga gives to her great-great-great-grandchildren comes back into being. And it's interesting how this worked for me. Like, I remember in Wonder Woman, they did something similar in the movie where Ares was like this force of evil whispering into people's ears during World War I. And I didn't like that as much. And I feel like I also, sometimes Nethercott hinted that pogroms and wars started because of whispering into ears. And I don't like using that sort of supernatural justification for mass acts of violence. I can, buy it in terms of, in this story, the Long Shadow Man, as he is hunting Thistlefoot the house, goes and, is able to influence individuals along the way in a random sort of way. I can buy that as a villainous thing, a supernatural villainous thing where he plays on their stereotypes and their fears and makes them do violence. But when it comes to, saying that genocide and mass violence is due to supernatural forces, that takes too much responsibility out of human hands. But anyway, that's a ramble. I feel like I'm getting off topic. You don't have to care too much about any of that stuff to really enjoy the lyrical writing. Isaac and Ballantine have this really fascinating, quirky history. They're, first of all, they're living in a house with chicken legs. They're trying to put on a puppet show to, make money, and they have a family history in puppet shows, so it's like a, really well done and intriguing production. And it's also about the fact that they have their own magic powers, which again, I guess I'm kind of okay. I'm okay with that. It seems like those magic powers are in fact born out of the traumas that their family suffered. So it's a way of metaphorically talking about how trauma goes down through the generations. And it's about Isaac and Bellatine coming to terms with things in their personal pasts as well. And living their lives to the fullest they can and taking some responsibility. Yeah, I just thought it really worked well. I really enjoyed the book a lot. I actually did mostly listen to it on audio before it was yoinked away from me, and I enjoyed the audiobook narrator as well, just saying. Next, this is technically my Yom Kippur Day reading and also my page 112 tag pick from a couple of weeks ago. This is We Just Want to Live Here by Amal Rifa'i and Odelia Ainbinder with Silke Temple as the person who put this together. Temple was a correspondent in the Middle East, and she reached out to these two kids who 20 years ago were part of a Israeli-Palestinian student group to Switzerland, and that's how they met shortly before the Second Intifada. And then the Second Intifada really messed up a whole lot of things in terms of community and building bridges in Israel and Palestine because of all of the violence. But she was able to reach out to both girls and have them start a letter campaign back and forth to each other for these young kids to talk about how they perceive and live the conflict. And so it's very YA in a lot of ways. They're writing in English, which is neither of their first language, and they're 18-year-olds. And so it's kind of easy reading, even though the topics are hard. And I come in with, a lot of personal associations and ways that I view what they're saying. And like, Odelia for being, a Jew who loves her country, but also, is very critical of Israel. She's an Israeli secular Jew. So there's ways that I view even Jewish history and culture that she doesn't take much into account, and religion certainly, because she doesn't seem to have much religious affiliation. But it is fascinating. I think something Temple brought up in the intro that then stuck with me is how Odelia's thoughts, I feel like, are more complicated. Her letters tend to be longer. She's more nuanced, but that is to say that she's somebody who lives as a free citizen in her country. So, I mean, it's wonderful and great that she can allow herself to be this individual. But on the other end of the stick, Amal, she's actually, this is a pseudonym name because her family was a little concerned about reactions, but Amal does live technically, in a oppressed minority position, in a position where, the desire for a state is not, seen out yet. So there is less individual sort of diversity and nuance in a lot of Palestinian thinking, I think. Or at least so far as I've read through these letters so far from these 18-year-olds. And I think Temple really wanted to go to 18-year-olds to, like, see people who were mostly living on the ground and not getting too tangled up into the politics and to the grandstanding of it all. This was, I think, her way of trying to save herself maybe from being so burnt out by being a Middle East correspondent. And I am glad she brought these two young voices to life. These 18-year-olds were about 18 when I was 18, and so I am curious. I wish I knew where they were now. I mean, this book was published, 20 years ago, but it's still, I only have a little bit left. I'll probably finish it today, and it's been very thought-provoking. And the final book I have to talk about here is Trust by Hernan Diaz, or really I'll briefly mention it here to say I think this is technically now it's like 4 novellas in one book, and it's historical fiction, and it's about, I guess, how the characters and society interact with these novellas that Hernan Diaz put together into one book. But that is all I will say about this story now, because I am reading it for the BookTube Prize. finals. The BookTube Prize was put together by Robert at Barter Hordes for the literary community to judge the best in literary fiction and nonfiction published the year before in the US. We start with long lists of 48 books per division and whittle them down through 4 rounds. And now we are in the final round, and in less than a week I have to submit my ballot so that Robert can officially announce all the winners and runners-up. So I still have some bit to go with this. That's all I'll say. I'm sure I can get it done in time. Very excited in general for this year's BookTube Prize to be finished and to see how every book ranks, and to then listen hopefully to videos and so forth from my fellow judges, because right now we're being mum and, judging things independently, but then hopefully a lot of us will give our feelings in videos post-prize about the books on the ballot. So if you would like to learn more about the BookTube Prize, I have a link down below, and I also made a preliminary thoughts video about the finals ballot in fiction before I started reading it, so I'll leave that video down below as well. So that about covers it for me now, and speaking of the BookTube Prize, I'll be back on this channel to do another type of tag video called the Would You Read It tag, where I've been reading the first couple of paragraphs of a bunch of books and asking my audience what they think, and I have been using the template of old BookTube Prize ballots, from pre-year 2023, so I will have one of the ballots from an earlier year to talk about the beginnings of the books anyway. Some of them I've read and some of them I haven't, so it'll be fun to revisit and to reconsider new books, so stay tuned for that. It's been really rainy weather here lately in the DC area, and things seem to be cooling down, maybe more of a fall motif going on, although it would be nice to maybe see the sun again. Who knows? I guess I'll just have to wait and see. I hope you all are enjoying good weather wherever you are in the world, staying safe, and picking up some good reading. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.